One, two, one, two. I think it's slow. I'll get you another one while I'm getting.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the NICG Fireplace Conversations. My name is Edla Kaumbi, the Executive Director of the NICG. And tonight, we are talking about a topic that most governance professionals don't spend a lot of time in, that is sports. And yet sports touch many lives of communities and students and young people. So it deserves the same kind of rigorous governance attention that banks and public enterprises and listed entities do. But before we get into it, we want to thank those people who made it possible for us to have this NICG Fireplace Conversation series. 91, one of the leading asset managers in this country and on the continent. Thank you, 91, for making it possible for us to have the Fireplace Conversations. So let's get into it. I am joined tonight by three people who are going to talk about sports governance from the perspective of an athlete, from the institution, and from a governance perspective. So that is deliberate. And they are Desmond, Diina, and Dominic, 3Ds for oomph. Dominic Roux, we're starting with you. She's a chartered ergonomist, is that how we say it? And a human factors specialist, which already makes you one of the few rarities that we've had here. We haven't had somebody like that here, so welcome. She leads HFE, Human Factors and Ergonomics Namibia, and serves as a board member of the Namibia Sports Commission. Her career began in orthopedic rehabilitation and has evolved into a systems-focused practice aimed at injury prevention, error reduction, and human performance in complex environments. She has held sports science and management roles with elite teams, including the Namibian road cycling team at the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, and Namibia Rugby at the 2019 and 2023 Rugby World Cups in Japan and France, respectively. She now consults across mining and banking, which tells you something important, that principles of human performance and governance do not change depending on the sector. It's just how you apply it that changes. So, sorry, Dominic, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Making me choke here. My second guest has not just observed sport from the outside. She has been inside it at the highest level. Diina Shituula is a chartered surveyor, a PMP certified project management professional. She holds an executive MBA from Henley Business School. She has worked across Namibia, South Africa, Germany, the UAE, North Africa, and East Africa. Okay, girl. On large-scale infrastructure, property, and facilities projects. Within sport, Diina served on the FIFA Normalization Committee for Namibia. She, the committee that FIFA appointed to intervene in Namibia football governance. She currently supports football and sports infrastructure development as an infrastructure consultant for the Coalition of African Football, the CAF, and has been involved in school and stadium infrastructure projects across the continent. She also remains an active football player, currently competing in the FNB Women's Super League, yes, and having represented Namibia at senior national team level as well. Wow. So something she brings that's rare to this conversation is the perspective of a governance practitioner who has also been an athlete that governance affects. Diina, welcome.
Thank you.
And then the third guest needs a little bit of a disclosure. He's kind of my boss. He is the chairperson of the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance. So he knows better what governance actually means and the standards and expectations that we have. Desmond Nikanor works at the intersection of strategy, governance, performance, and culture. He is a senior manager, human resources at the Namibia Diamond Trading Company, founder and lead consultant of Strategy Consulting Namibia, and a PhD candidate at the Namibia, no? You're already a PhD person. Candidate. Do you not want us to mention this? Yes. And he's a trustee at the Namibia the Retirement Fund Institute of Namibia and Gem Health. And his consulting client includes the Namibia Sports Commission. So you're a certified director of companies and a certified balanced scorecard professional. So Desmond is our governance anchor for tonight. Desmond, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. So sports has been declared a national priority. I think one of the second priorities in the country. So that means, public funds, that means public expectations, and just, general accountability and so on. And when we're thinking we talk about governance is supposed to lead to certain outcomes. That's good performance, is ethical leadership, effective control, and legitimacy, which is the kind of focus and the kind of outcomes we would want for sports. Because when this is not done well, it doesn't affect, if organizations don't govern well, it's not just them that it affects the athletes who then, don't get to perform and so on, and that is not fair. So tonight, we want to explore what good governance actually looks like in practice. So to just start us off, sports in Namibia has been declared the governance, like I said, second national development priority. With that elevation comes public expectation, public scrutiny. What does governance actually mean in that context? Maybe Desmond, I'll start with you. Is it the same as what we do for companies, or is it something different?
Thank you, Edla, and a warm greeting to those in the room and those watching online. So the answer is quite straightforward. It's a yes and a no.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Governance remains the same, irrespective of whether we're speaking this in the sport context, in the corporate context, in churches and schools. It's the same because the dictionary definition of governance is simply ethical and effective leadership. And I mean, if you can imagine, that applies to any sort of body or person. Yes. That is placed in charge of resources, budgets, people, and so forth. So in the principles of governance remains the same. However, the specificities differ from sector to sector.
Yeah.
Now, with sports, and maybe I must disclaim, yes, I'm here as a governance enthusiast, but I'm primarily here as a sport fanatic myself, as a citizen of this country who loves sport. So, and that's what makes sports governance so complex, is because there are multiple stakeholders with often competing interests.
Yes.
And normally in governance, when you're in a situation where you have different people who expect different things of one entity, it makes it a difficult governance arrangement. You can imagine, I mean, as I said, I'm not part of the Sport Commission, I'm not part of NSC, I'm not part of FIFA or CAF or NFA, but I have a legitimate expectation out of the Brave Warriors. And in our rugby team, I feel as though I'm entitled. I feel entitled to their performance, to how they're doing, to how they are funded, to where they train, how the ticket prices are. That makes it quite difficult. So if you had to break down those four outcomes, I mean, you said it correctly. Governance is actually the endeavor to achieve four things, which is an ethical leadership, which is a performance, which is oversight and legitimacy. So out of those four, ethical leadership and effective control and oversight is pretty much the same, whether you're in sport or wherever, that remains the same. Yeah. But what makes it particularly complicated in this instance is the other two, which is performance and legitimacy. Why is that? Is because, again, I'll use the same example. How do we measure the success of, for instance, the NFA or the Brave Warriors or the rugby or the national rugby team? As a layman, we look at it whether are we playing in the World Cup, are we winning, are we participating? But it's not always that simple. So very few organizations, it's quite unfair sometimes to reduce an entire ecosystem into one performance metrics, which makes it difficult in a sporting context. If I use a very example that's close to home, I think one of the most dominant sporting teams in the world at this point in time is the Springboks. They've won 2 World Cups in a row. They have been dominating, I think, world number 1 for the past 10 years or so. But what you would know is that the organization that runs it, SARU, has been having a plethora of governance challenges. In fact, they've been non-profitable for the longest over those 10 years. So what do we say? Do we say, is that performance good or bad? Is it on-field performance, or is it sort of off-field performance? So that area makes it a bit complicated. And the second one is legitimacy. Legitimacy is basically your social contract, meaning those stakeholders that are interested in your organization, they all agree with what you are doing, your existence, and how you are doing it. Now, again, it's complicated in sport because me as a layperson, I retired from football many years ago at amateur level, but I have an opinion on how the national team should play. And I feel that opinion is legitimate. And so from all the stakeholders, government, sponsors, international bodies like FIFA, our own league, public, there's so many different stakeholders that want different things. So whose legitimacy do we take as the primary one? I think if you break down governance on those 4 outcomes and you overlay the sport side, you will see that yes, it's the same in practice, but in actuality, some are much more complicated than others.
But maybe speaking to that, sorry, before I carry on, either way, I mean, we still want legitimacy. It's just that how we define legitimacy is different, though. So doesn't it then go to say that whatever the expectations are for legitimacy, still there is, for example, those who are sponsoring, who are giving money, if that money is poorly funded, then that legitimacy in that area is lacking, which is still important. Or if people belong to a federation and they don't make it to the World Cup because, I don't know, maybe they were not properly equipped, then they also lose trust of these other stakeholders. So shouldn't it all matter then in any case, because we're talking governance, though too, maybe more complicated. And ladies, you can add if you want to, yeah. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I think Desmond has really explained it and touched every different sector that it entails. But just adding on to what you're saying, it's all about the balance. So yes, all these different stakeholders, they need to be, all the different stakeholders are important. But when it comes to, what makes it complicated is when it comes to sports governance, it's about the balance. So yes, even the player that's at home who retired when he was in grade 7, the former national team player, they're all seen as, say, public interest, right? So there's public interest, and there's those people who sit at home on their couches, judging the players from the couch. FIFA, CAF, the sponsors, the government, the Sports Commission, all of those people, the different federations. What makes it complicated is you have to try to balance that, and that's what makes it complicated.
Exactly.
I think that's my only addition to what Desmond has said.
Yeah. Do you want to add something, Desmond? Okay, that's good. Do you want to add something, Dominic? Because the next question is for you anyway. Because the Sports Commission, you sit between government and the federation. So as a regulator and a funder, does that create tension? Or how does that work for you? Yeah. Is it something different? We don't want you to say anything.
I want to say something. Before I answer your question that's directed at me, I'd like to add on to what both Diina and Desmond have just said. And I think the big thing with most organizations, you can define your complex system. But with sport, it goes a little further and beyond because you have direct public interest as well. You've got the athletes, you've got youth athletes, you've got senior athletes. There are certain aspects that you need to take into consideration. And because of that complex system, leadership, I think, in my opinion, that leadership and ethical leadership is what is required, because that will then flow down into good governance, and that will then assist within decision-making in the system that affects the end user or then the public. So that's just to add on to what they've said. But with regards to tension as a governing body and a funder, and a regulator, I think there's definitely tension. It is difficult. The government also regulates and funds, so they also face some of the challenges. And I think the Sport Act is what we need to use as our guideline. That is what's been provided, that is what is currently available, and we need to use that in accordance to ensure that there is compliance from the federation's perspective to protect the athletes, but also to qualify for funding. And I think the tension comes in when there is a disconnect between the compliance and the execution. And that has to be aligned and consistent. And that can reduce tension within the dual role of the NSC, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. My mind is thrilling a little bit because I like that we defined governance that way. And I think, mentioning the complexity of specifically legitimacy, I think acknowledging the complexity, I would still want to maybe to some level define, what would success look like in terms of legitimacy or not maybe define it, but mention, what does legitimacy or what would increase legitimacy from the the retired students' perspective? What would make it successful for the government? For like that. Maybe if we can speak to just a little bit to that. Maybe going off on a tangent a bit.
Yeah, so if I rephrase your question, it's how to marry all of those different possible expectations
Maybe a metric. Maybe the different metrics is for.
Yeah. No, fair. And I think, as I said, and I've worked in spaces where this type of arrangement exists. And to be honest, it is the most complicated space to govern and to lead. Because it's easy to lead when you, know all your stakeholders, or you have one stakeholder that you need to please.
Right.
It's even easier to lead when you have many stakeholders you need to please, but they're sort of on the same direction. Yeah. But in this instance where these interests, expectations can be competing, I think that's where it gets a bit difficult. And the difficult call to make, and what I've seen being done successfully in certain institutions, is actually to acknowledge and prioritize which stakeholders are more important than the others. And it's maybe not a politically correct thing to say or do, but as leadership, you actually have to make a call and say, yes, we have these 12 stakeholders, and they say, all are equal, but some are more equal than others. And if, for instance, if the sporting development, if we're in a stage of maturity, maybe we need to prioritize, for instance, one specific stakeholder over the other and sort of have that priority and rotation. But what you cannot do is try, especially in competing instances, is try to meet everybody, because you'll stretch your resources and you'll end up trying to please everybody and pleasing nobody.
Yeah. And I don't know whether the next question maybe leads into that, because, if we're talking Namibia football, we've had 2 FIFA normalization committee issues. Those were imposed on FIFA. FIFA normalization committee imposed on NFA. Yeah, sorry. So various federations have faced public criticism for non-responsiveness to member complaints and inconsistent application of their own rules. What is the actual governance problem in this case, in the Namibian sports structure? Is it the structure? Is it the people? Is it the culture? Like what do we think is that? And is it something that that comes out of what we just talked about now?
Yeah, definitely. If I may start. I think if we look at the different federations in Namibia, different federations have different problems. I think if you look at one of the examples that Desmond highlighted was the Springboks. The Springboks being a successful team, however, Saru, not so good with governance.
Right.
And I mean, I've never heard of, I don't know how the rugby union works, but I've never heard of Saru being under some sort of normalization. or whatever. Why is that,
Right.
And obviously, I can only speak really on football. And with the 2 normalization committees that we've had, we've also dealt with different things. When the first normalization committee was appointed, they had a mandate, they executed their mandate, and FIFA came back and said, oh, well, we've sorted out this problem, but now there's this problem. Because when we took over, it was, we were also managing the daily activities of the NFA. So that was a different problem on its own, because an executive committee is supposed to act like a board. So you don't have a board dealing with day-to-day activities. So we were basically running the NFA with the assistance of the Secretary General, who is like the CEO. Yeah. So the 6 of us were actually running the NFA. So there's different things, but I think if I can highlight a few, and also just touching on the first question is the biggest thing for me, if I look at football, is athletes' interest. At the moment, we don't have a players' union, but that's something that FIFA is looking into. Why? I don't want to go into that, why we don't have a players' union at this point, but it is a structure that is there, that has been, that is supposed to be in the NFA structure. Yeah. So that is something that FIFA is looking into, and it's an important thing. Okay? And then the other thing as well is, over the past, say, 2 months, there's been a lot of controversial things that have happened at the World Cup, at the AFCON, and it all ties into governance, the committees, so independent committees. So that's another thing that we have an issue with, the independent committees. So audit, so where
But
money
they are
is
not
lost.
independent, or what is the issue with that?
I think it's an issue of are the decisions that are the decisions that they are making, are they fair? You know, is there transparency?
Right.
Yeah, because they are supposed to be independent. So the question is always, people think that the different presidents are interfering with the different governing bodies, which is obviously not supposed to be the case. So that's always there's always a conspiracy around that. That's always a bone of contention. And then I think something else is federations don't have a lot of money. Federations don't have a lot of money to work with. And obviously, if you want the best candidates for the job, so in terms of professionalism, if you want a CA heading your finance department, you're going to have the money to pay the CA. But federations don't have money. They rely on sponsorships. The money that they get from the government is limited. The money that they get from governing bodies is limited. So you stuck with not the best candidates, obviously. So that's also another issue. I think I'll
Well,
stop
I'd like to add on to that, if
go
I
ahead.
may.
Yes, please.
I think well said. Absolutely agree with you. Federations are all different. They all have their own constitution as well, which they need to comply with. And as you rightly said, the funding. I mean, part of compliance is they have to have audited statements. And if they can't afford that, they can't comply, which means they can be removed. So it's a very challenging time that we are facing. And if we need to apply changes and identify these gaps, to be able to apply changes and have good governance and have people comply. But if it's not possible for them to comply, due to limitations, we need to then support those limitations to a certain extent. I'm talking about the NAC as such, together with ministry, then look at these gaps and identify them. And I also want to add on to that, which you rightly said, is leadership behavior. If we don't improve on leadership behavior and we don't have, positive outcomes, you have a lack of trust within federations. You have poor communication lines, and then that leads to poor decision-making or informal decision-making, which affects your athletes in the end.
Yeah.
It's not directly affecting the individuals that are sitting in leadership positions or operational positions, executives. It affects the athletes ultimately, and yet we expect them to perform.
Yeah. So who fixes that? Because I mean, one of the problems is, and is that problem because of limited funding? The fact that there's concentration of power, that you would have a president who is also doing day-to-day things. So they make the decision, they oversee their own decision, and they kind of enact the decision that they made. Which is a problem. It's a governance problem. But does that happen because we have limited funds, and if something like that is happening, who's supposed to address it, and is it being addressed, and how is it being addressed?
That's a very good question, but a tough one, I think. Ultimately, I mean, it consists of federations, the NAC, and then ministry, if you look at the line. So the federations know that they have to have audited statements to be compliant, so they need to budget for that. I understand that if there are limited funds, there's also time to apply, because when your financial year end is, and you have 90 days post-financial year end to submit your audited statements, for example. So since we are on the topic, so then the NAC is governing that to ensure that the federations all comply if they are registered with the NAC. And from there, other than that, I mean, the Sports Act is the guiding document which tells them what to comply with. So then if that is a major concern and really leading to governance issues, then we need to look at changing the Act and not only relying on the federations to get funding for their compliance issues or audited statements in this case. So I'm going to return the question, whose responsibility is it?
Do you have thoughts on that? Because I'm thinking as well, like if my information is correct, when say these bodies don't comply or whatever, then you kind of withdraw funding, or do you do that as a penalty, which then affects
which then affects
the athlete?
Exactly. So I think the answer is it's everybody's responsibility. If I look at again football. So you get funding from the government, you get funding from FIFA, you get funding from CAF and you have sponsors. The sponsor has its own rules and policies that you need to follow in terms of when does the sponsor decide to avail more funding that the NFA has to comply with. FIFA has the same, CAF has the same. A team manager traveling with a team has the same. So at every level, everybody has a responsibility to make sure they're doing the right thing. And I think I want to leave it there.
Maybe, I don't know if you want to add, Desmond, because I want to talk about the Sports Act. You know, she talked about financial statements that, you know, that are required. So from a governance standpoint, what does it mean when a governance rule exists but is not enforced? I mean, we know in this case that, you know, the athletes bear the consequence, but what can be done?
So I mean, firstly, that's a statutory requirement, right? So the Sport Act is quite clear on what is required of these bodies. And to be fair, it's not a sport thing, neither a sport federation thing. I think on the NICG, or most of us who are in the public space will know that there are billion-dollar companies in this country that fail to produce audited statements.
Of course, yeah.
So I never automatically chalk it down to lack of resources. I don't automatically do that.
Right.
I think from the onset, it has to be established whether, firstly, they are unable or unwilling. That honestly determines where the root cause should be. Because if they are genuinely unable to, for skills reasons, lack of audit committee structures, lack of finances, like we are saying, there's are remedies for all of that. I mean, most audit firms have pro bono work. They do stuff for free. Most audits, you can cost them. You can know with my eyes closed, I could say how much an audit will cost a specific organization of a specific size. So that's one. I think when they are unwilling to, I think that's really dangerous. Because what audited financial statements is it's not a tick box. It's not an exercise just to comply to a piece of legislation. Firstly, it helps you for those who want to fund you and those who want to sponsor you to do that better for you. So it's almost having an independent eye, somebody who is not got any skin in the game in terms of your organization, comes in and looks at your books and says, in terms of what you wanted to do, this is how it looks like. And so that when government wants to fund, they know where to channel it. If commercial sponsors, and I think that's where we fall them, that's the biggest tragedy for me, is that it's irresponsible. I said on a private company, it will be irresponsible for me, even if how much I love whatever sport called tennis, for me to approve a sponsorship into a body where I cannot account for where those funds go to.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how passionate and how much I believe and how much great the presentation was, I would be performing bad governance from where I'm at. So the ultimate, everybody suffers in this in that sort of arrangement. Government suffers because they don't know where to deploy their scarce funds for them to get the most out of it. Sponsors suffer because, as I say, their hands are tied, they can't. The athletes suffer. The sporting code itself suffers. So I think non-compliance and the biggest degradation it creates is that lack of credibility, that lack of social legitimacy. So yes, I like what you are doing, but because I have no idea how you are doing it, I cannot really be involved beyond just looking at you from outside. And that hands-off approach that we will create is much more detrimental than the actual non-compliance to a piece of legislation. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know there's Mr. John Trust and Mr. John Trust.
Jochentraut.
Mr. Jochen, I see your word, just to acknowledge you. And there are maybe some sports fanatics here. Maybe do you have some thoughts, some comments with regards to these questions that have been posed? Can we give him a microphone? The online people can't hear you. They would love to hear you too.
I think something that was not touched on is strategic plans. Because when you look at Namibia cricket, they had the plan, they had the vision, and they moved on. And this is why they are successful. When we were at the NFA, the normalization committee, we were not allowed to do the strategic plan because we had to bring the house in order. We turned a 30 million loss into a 20 million profit within 1 year. Wow. And that is because we focused on getting internal structures in place. Hard decisions were made. We had to fire a few people because they were not performing. But we couldn't manage everything, but the time was simply too short. But the next step should have been a proper strategic plan and say, okay, fine. When you take Morocco, they had a plan. They started 10 years ago. Youth football, grew it up, and then after 10 years, now they're reaping it. Now they're the most successful team in Africa. And that is what is missing. Strategic plans with time frames. And if you have a strategic plan, then you can go to a sponsor or to FIFA, and they will give you the funds. But as long as you don't have a plan, people will not support you. I mean, look at the NFA now. 2 congresses, not a single financial report presented, no budget presented, and in those 2 years, still no strategic plan in place. And I think planning, vision, and having time with it, then people will do successful.
Thank you. So is that something maybe the Sports Commission can enforce? And, you know, because it sounds like a simple, like an obvious something, you know, in terms of governance, you know, because as part of your, you know, strategy, you know, you exist for a reason, you have a purpose, and therefore you have a plan how you're going to, you know, execute this mandate for which you exist. Take the microphone back.
Thank you. Itla, yes, I think, I mean, if it's something that can be proposed, it's something that can be done. I don't think there's a limitation to that. And if the reason for that is for good governance and the benefit of the athlete, absolutely. One thing I wanted to add, he mentioned cricket. The big thing with them is also they define their roles. Leadership and operations very clearly define their roles. They separated boards from operational teams, and they ensured that their strategic plan is followed, guided, and executed. And I think within a leadership perspective for good governance, that is also why they're very successful at the moment. It's because they had that separation of roles.
Yeah, I'm thinking obviously. So, but now my question, I wonder, is it then that isn't enforced, and that because what is the Sports Commission as a regulator? What is it that you are regulating? Then, when you are regulating, what are some of the things you're looking at besides the audited financial statements? Then,
so not the day-to-day operations of the federations necessarily. They've got their own election systems and processes. They've got their own constitutions that they need to follow. So they submit their constitutions, and we have to ensure as a regulator that they comply with their own constitutions. And I think part of that challenge is if you can standardize certain aspects within those constitutions and guide the federations instead of allowing each federation to have their own constitution, that is definitely leading the right direction to enforce and have good governance in sports in general, not only within a single or 2 federations out of how many that we have. So I really think that is something that can be looked at and standardized. Also terms of boards, terms of operational leaders, you know, things like that. Because, I mean, you rightly said, you know, the power is in the holds of a few individuals. Yes, our country is small. Yes, we don't have a lot of people involved in sports always. So you have the same person involved for many years because they've got the passion. But again, is that good governance, or is that leading to poor decision making and affecting athletes in the long run? So by standardizing those processes and constitutions, potentially, we can rather then regulate and guide the federations and assist them.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Because Diina, I think I wanted to ask you, because, you know, the CAF had gone through their own crisis and they were forced to have, you know, the whatever 100-point plan or whatever. You can maybe tell us more details. What are some of the lessons that you learned from that, and were some of these things that were implemented, or what happened with that? Maybe give us more detail.
Okay. I think
for the purpose of the question, you don't have to go into
all right, the CAF
the tabloid stuff.
Okay, I think that for me, some lessons that that I think were revealed from the CAF experience is that, and we hate to do this, but reform requires leadership courage. You know, we take offense when we are being scrutinized. Whereas, and what happened at CAF was it required leadership courage, and the leaders had to accept the scrutiny and implement the 100-point plan. Okay, so that's maybe the one thing that I can think of that we really struggle to do in this country. Transparency. I think that's also a really, really big one. Transparency, both the legitimacy that we were discussing. And then again, with the all these controversial things that happen, it's independent structures. There are too many times where we hear of boards getting involved in operations, day-to-day operations, and you know, with appeal committees, how discipline is handled, audited financials, things like that. So we definitely need the independent structures to gain stakeholder trust. The other thing I think is that if governance issues linger on, they become a much, much, much bigger problem. And from what I've seen is these things don't really come out, you know, 3 months from when the problem starts, 6 months from when the problem starts. You realize it 5 years later. I think Jochen spoke about Morocco having a 10-year plan. Yeah, they're only reaping the rewards of that plan now, but the opposite is also very true. Where things that are happening today, we're going to see the detriment of that in 10 years' time. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Anybody wants to add to that? Because I have next question for you, Desmond, that there's a governance principle that says that the athlete is the primary stakeholder of sport. I mean, we did mention that earlier. And that's like the equivalent of the beneficiary of a trust. But athletes, they rarely sit on these federation boards, or they have, you know, they don't have formal channels to raise concerns. Diina, you are both a governance practitioner and an active player of the FNB Women's League. What does that feel like from the athlete side? Yeah, maybe you both can answer that. From the governance perspective and then from the athlete's perspective.
Okay, so having worn, you know, let's say 3 of the hats that you spoke of, I think in any position that I was in, I always felt that, you know, football belongs to me. You know, as the athlete, football belongs to you. When you serving on a committee, football belongs to you. You feel like you need to be listened to. So yeah, but when you, if you have a much broader understanding of how things work, you are able to maybe look at everything more holistically. As an athlete, you want to be given the best, you want to be given the most, but sometimes it's just not possible. Even just being a woman in football, fighting for the same rights as a male footballer, you know. So yeah, it's again complicated.
Yeah. And I think, again, to be fair to the fraternity, this aspect of athletes not being correctly represented at the correct level is not unique to the sporting fraternity. I think it's one of the things that I appreciate about being at let me say, having a helicopter view of governance in Namibia. I mean, you find the very same principle, it plays itself out, for instance, in universities, where the university exists for the learner, the student, you know, the 18 or 19-year-old. But ordinarily, if you don't hard code representation at specific levels, I think you'll see now at NASTA and UNAM, it has been from the beginning that a student will always sit on council, they will sit on the board. So ordinarily in instances like this, the athlete may easily be overlooked. And I'm of the individual opinion that, yes, I spoke about many stakeholders, but we talk about also the primacy when we talk about prioritization of stakeholders. The athlete should be at the center of it. But that doesn't happen magically. It actually has to be hard-coded. Right. And there's a reason for that. Athletes, by definition, spend a large part of their lives specializing in a specific thing, a discipline and excellence. They don't necessarily broaden their skills to say, you know, I'm going to be a proficient archer And I'm also going to prepare myself for a life of serving on audit committees of the the Archery Federation. So that athlete development program and journey and strategy has to actually be much more comprehensive than just technical skills.
Right.
Secondly, you have to, as I said, you have to hard code. For instance, you say a federation must have a former athlete or a current athlete sitting on the federation board as a hard-coded area of the constitution. She spoke about standards. That's a standard that you can almost prescribe.
Yeah.
And then I think lastly, and I made some notes here, is that you spoke about, and you made a good point, I don't know if it was Dominic or Diina, around the lack of player unions. And collective bargaining is a principle that is again should exist in any institution, because what it does is it gives, where there is individuals, it brings a collective voice and allows you to almost forward your interests in a collective space. So we may just see it to say, no, FIFA wants a players union just for a tick box. No, there's a reason why collective bargaining is important. So I think we would have to set up systems, and I think that's I don't need to be an athlete to know that.
Yeah.
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 Can I add on
Yes,
to
please
that?
do.
I like your systems approach.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, again, even if you have athletes represented on operational level, where they can voice their needs or they can voice their concerns with regards to leadership or decision making, it has to be an active athlete, because some of these athlete representatives played 10, 15 years ago for Namibia, and now they are the athlete rep. So they don't necessarily know what the current issues are of the athletes on the field. And I think that's very important. Again, if you do implement the system, it has to be standardized and it has to be well understood that the athlete is the end user. So, and I think the Olympic Committee did a good job with the Commonwealth Games now, where they actually ask the athletes with regards to clothing, what do you need? Do you have any concerns with regards to your clothing that you get? Or is there anything that irritates you and, sort of affects your performance for that matter? And the athletes were allowed to voice their opinion. And I think that's brilliant from their perspective to bring that in. And we need that, because we cannot make decisions which will affect the athletes if we don't involve them and know what they need.
Yeah. Any thoughts from the audience, comments? Anything from our online? Do we have any people online who are commenting something? Oh, okay. Yes, go ahead. Maybe introduce yourself and then...
Good evening, my name is Urban. I'm from the ministry, but tonight I'm on my own behalf. What a wonderful, whoever choose this topic, God bless you.
It's actually one
at the
of
right time. I think this is part one of none other parts to come. I totally agree with the panel on all the points, totally. Let me start with the issue of performance. We sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture of sports as well. We focus too much on competitive sports, but if you go to the broader spectrum of sport, you go into sport for development. And there you see that sport, bigger part contributing to the social cohesion or the broader society aspect. You can look at school sports, for example. It have a direct impact on the fabric of society.
Right.
So when you measure, we should not only measure the medals, but also the other benefits of sports. That's one. Two, I happen to work on a pilot project for sports professionalization, one of the federations. And we find a institution with everything run by the board, and we assisted them to get an operational structure. Yet, it's still difficult to separate the two 2 years down the line. So it's a culture thing. There's no excuse. I totally agree with you with the principles and the pillars of governance should apply. And it's much more complex with sports because there is a volunteerism line that you can't apply to what. But it is important, three things, and I'm glad perhaps this year there's a topic on sport reset or sports reform, looking at three areas. And that is the structural realignment of the ecosystem. There's a problem in zone in terms of all the stakeholders because there's overlaps of of functions and conflict and so on. There's a lot of policy gaps, outdated policies. I can tell you the Boxing and Control Board Act is more than 45 years old, never been reviewed. So these are some of the issues.
Yeah.
And at the heart of it is governance. And I have to applaud our board member of the commission today. I happened to officiate at the Sport Awards launch today, and they brought in a new category on governance and sport administration. And within that is issues of board effectiveness, representation of athletes on boards, but it have to go down from federations to club level, because the club is what we forget the most, because this is where the athlete is. This is where the salaries need to be paid.
Good.
So within a club system, you get those that go to competitive sports, but the rest don't make it, because less than 10% of Namibians are at competitive sport. But the rest go to that social investment, return on social investment, that talks about the fabric of your society, which is a bigger picture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. Yeah, no, for real. So good. So good. Oh, we have somebody online.
Yes, we do have two comments from Shange Simon and then Henok Hamtenya. One of the comments that they put here, in their opinion, they believe that poor funding is the key issue within Namibia sport.
Okay.
And the second element, they believe that the coaching department and NFA is not well managed, and sometimes they don't follow the Sport Act. It was also alluded that there is a key challenge that sometimes for the national team, quality players are not selected. And how does that look like? Is it a governance issue? Is it something that we need to maybe appoint a committee to then oversee that?
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, online viewers. Do you want to talk to those comments, mention?
I just have one comment about the coach and I think he said coaching and selection of national players. There's currently a very, very important tournament going on right now, which is the World Cup. And I can tell you now that even the England team, some people don't agree with the choices that the coach has made. If the four of us now were all appointed a team, we would all choose different players. And not everybody's going to be happy with us. That's just the way it is. I don't really think it's a governance issue. Yes, there might be some governance issues, but even if there is no governance issue, there will always be an issue with the selection of national team players because it's a preference. It becomes a preference.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to agree with that. Again, I'm balancing my hats as a sports fanatic and a governance enthusiast. And even in the most hardcore corporate structures, there is space for rigidity in governance, and there's a large space for discretion. You'd find that the average manager, the average CEO, utilizes their expertise. They're appointed because they must utilize their expertise, their experience, to make specific calls on a discretionary basis. So even if I remove myself from the emotions of football, I ultimately understand that a coach is appointed to exercise their discretion.
Yes.
And I think that's something we actually have to accept.
Yeah.
In the same way we do for normal organizations. Yeah.
Even that manager being chosen, somebody else thought, but I was a better candidate.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think with funding, I think that could be addressed with what you mentioned earlier, like, maybe funding would become more available when we can show that we are good stewards of the funds that we do receive, when we have transparency and things like that, maybe.
Absolutely. Transparency and building trust.
Yeah.
Once again, as Desmond also said, and Diina also touched on that, is when you are funded, when you have a sponsor, they demand to know what their money is being used for. And if we don't comply with giving reports on all the funds that were used for a specific tour or specific expenditure, then the transparency is not there, so the trust is not going to be there, regardless of compliant or not. And if the trust is not there, then the question is, are you going to reinvest in that same team or that same federation?
Right.
So I think, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm not sure what they were referring to exactly, but it's important to build those relationships and transparency and good communication between the federations and the funders, so that, you know, once they do get funds and they're compliant, then everyone knows what's happening with it and they can reinvest more.
Yeah. Well, our time is running out. This is so good. I'm so excited. I'm hoping that whoever, you know, the minister, the commission, that we're taking these things and, you know, really implementing them. I mean, we heard now, and I mentioned earlier that, you know, sports has been elevated to a national priority, and we see why, because of just the impact that it has. So if you all were to advise the minister in terms of, you know, some governance intervention that they could make over the next 12 months, what would those be? Should we start with you, Dominic?
I was hoping to go last because I want 2 requests, if I may.
Go ahead, sure. So you can take notes because after all, you're the regulator, you know what I mean?
I think, first of all, with the current situation that some of our board members' term have expired, we are not a quorum. So I think firstly I would request her to please, you know, select some members for the board to be active and have a quorum again, firstly.
Really
Secondly,
practical.
very practical. Once we get there, I think the other thing is to introduce a program over the next 3 years that can assist and guide the federations through a roadmap to ensure that they comply with all the requirements so that they can receive funding and there is a build of trust and there is a transparency and improve the leadership and behaviors and culture in the sport and the federations, so that, you know, we can move forward on sport and focus on the athletes where it's required.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Diina?
I hope I don't get into trouble for saying this, but obviously being in football, having done consulting work for CAF, for FIFA, traveling around Africa, seeing all the wonderful stadiums and sports facilities, and knowing that our national teams have to play in South Africa, I've seen, and also being a chartered surveyor, so I know what a stadium costs. It's a little bit disheartening to see you know, us wanting to build a football stadium for about 3 billion. I also worked on the Cape Town Stadium and the Moses Mabhida Stadium when I was for the 2010 World Cup. So I definitely do think that we cannot afford a $3 billion stadium. Also from a perspective of facilities management, when you do the life cycle costing of a stadium, $3 billion stadium is going to turn out to be a white elephant. But what we can do, I do believe that we do have enough money to renovate the current stadium. And looking at the Independence Stadium, I also used to be a 100-meter sprinter.
Okay.
And looking at the Independence Stadium and being a little biased, if I look at athletics and football and just say that football and athletics are the biggest sporting codes in Namibia, we should be able to renovate the Independence Stadium, have a proper athletics track, have a CAF and FIFA accredited stadium, and maybe even have the rugby stadium that's across the road. I mean, that rugby stadium has corrugated iron fence, and that could maybe be our secondary training field. So if we can just renovate those two with the minimum that we need to do. That's my ask of the minister.
Okay. All right. Desmond.
Yeah, I think I'll take a bit of a different approach, and mine's more to offer. Because I thought to allow my 2 colleagues to actually speak as to what they require. And I think it's the one time I would like to abuse my power as as the chair of the NICG, and that's really to commit the NICG and to make it available. Oh, you're going to do
Yeah, we're in the spirit.
Yeah, I see. Is to make the NICG available to the minister, to the ministry. In fact, I must say I've never met the minister and the deputy minister personally, but I am actually quite a fan of their priorities, particularly around the infrastructure in rural areas. And I think they have the School Youth Development Fund that they've increased to around 257 million. So I'm actually quite a fan, I must say. And what I thought to do, instead of saying this is what I would like, I was just to offer. I think the NICG really has capacity and I don't mean necessarily within the secretariat, we do have access to a lot of really skilled individuals who will be more than happy to, contribute to the nation's development at a governance level. So whether it's assisting the NSC with the road mapping and see how the constitutions can be standardized, what should be there, to availing audit committee chairs, independent chairs, and the audit committee members and all of that, as well as to the Honorable Sanet Steenkamp and Dino Balotti, to also just make ourselves available in terms of how the NICG can partner with government. I think that's actually what I just wanted to put forward. Sorry for taking your...
I just feel like you stole my light. But no, for sure. No, for sure. I think I definitely wanted to say that what we will do is the NICG. And I think I'm relieved that that's the problem. It's like it can be fixed. So we would want to offer support in terms of, what good governance look like and, build capacity in that and, help with some of the structural administrative, issues and really support. I mean, we already do something for a non-profit organization that we do a very minimal fee. We can do this as well for federations. So I'm so excited that, these governance matters can be solved. Just get proper business plans, show what it looks like to have, segregation of duties and, proper governance structure. So this makes me hopeful and excited for our nation. And I think with that, our time is almost up, isn't it? Do we still have 5 minutes? Oh, wonderful. Do we have more time, more thoughts, comments from the audience?
Evening.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. It's the camera person.
Yes.
It's actually thanks to them. It was one of the ideas in terms of the topic. Yes.
So I would like just to contribute on the grassroots part in terms of governance. When you look at football, the levels of the leagues, if you go all the way down even to the 3rd division league, there's some sort of work that needs to be done, and it also replicates, as small as it is, it replicates what needs to be done up there, because the teams that qualify, they need to go there up. So also I've been fortunate enough to be in the structures, of course informal, so you can see people who are sacrificing their time to do, because it's part-time. And also maybe we should look at that, how maybe should the legislators or people who are in governance or people who regulate this type of rules, how can maybe governance cater for those small areas? Because every time when it's funding, we are only talking about the bigger picture instead of starting down there, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done under there. And also maybe on the commercialization of the sports, there's a lot. I mean, other countries make a lot of money out of the sports. They do a lot of things. How can, what work needs to be done around that in terms of legislation and working around it, so that professionalization is met halfway through those things?
I think if I can answer that indirectly, with regards to legislation and change to the Sports Act, we first need to align the Sports Act and regulations with good modern governance principles. And once we've done that, then we can have a look at how funds are then applied and used further down, rather than just looking at national sport. So I think you have a very good point, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And with the assistance of the NICG going forward, as they promised, that's something we can look at as part of the strategic plan, is how does the effect and the funds reach the lowest levels and clubs within the sport, and not only national teams. So thank you for that.
I don't really have much to add, but I will say that, and we've touched on this before, that the lack of funding is a huge issue. Even if you have the governance structures in place and you don't have money, you're going to struggle. And obviously, when we're looking at professionalization, you can't start from the bottom up. You have to start from the top down, because that's just, you have a Premier League, and that's your highest league in the country. So it doesn't make sense to start from the bottom down. You need to professionalize from the top down.
And how would you say sponsorships funding would change that?
Well, for starters, if you look at the salaries that I actually can't even call them salaries. So let's do a comparison. Let's do a comparison between the top club in South Africa and the top club in Namibia. We actually can't call ourselves professional footballers. It's actually a joke. Yeah, no, it's a joke. So just having said that, I think you can understand. People need to have jobs to play professional football in Namibia. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, Rome wasn't built in one day. I think just doing our homework and, cleaning house, I think is a start for sure. Because when we're saying, building trust, trust to be able to give funds, trust to be able to give support is when, you see responsible stewardship, and that can be done at any level, I think. And so this is what I'm hearing, that, we do have the acts, we do have, bodies that are in place, but then if we then apply these principles, at least there would be a start, I think. And we have committed ourselves, and the Sports Commission also seems eager. So I think really have a good start, Yeah. And I think by then we are running out of time. And so again, I don't know if they have 30-second final words from all of you before we close. The cameraman is looking at me, really?
Okay, I think the last point I want to make is that we can all agree that there's a lot of hand-holding that needs to take place. Sure. Not really, less finger-pointing, more hand-holding.
Yes, for sure. That's good.
I think for me, it's just I think the gentleman from the ministry really opened up a new folder in my mind, just around the social cohesion aspect of sports. To be honest, I didn't see it from that angle for most of before this evening. So I think when you talk about funding or governance, the cart or the horse or the cart first, let's make it clear. Governance can be done with no funding, and it has to start that, and it has to be the precursor for. So you do what you can with what you have, and then it will follow.
Yeah, I think so.
I like that. I think from my thing is just, or from my side, my plea is just that let's create a system that is professional and ethical for athletes to know that they are supported and they understand the system where they are the center of it. Yeah.
And really, thank you so much. And it's giving ESG, because that's what it is, the impact, all around. So again, we want to thank 91. You made this possible. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all our viewers online and here in person, and for engaging so meaningfully. It's been a great session. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time and being here.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.